Welcome back, guys.
We're live. We're live. We're live.
We are live. Welcome back. Kevin Perry and Johnny Sig here. We're going to talk about, the marvelous one, Marvin Hagler. Man, what a big blow to the boxing world and just the world in general. What a great fighter. People talk about him as the best middleweight of all time. You know what? He might have been one of the best fighters of all time. Look at that record. 62-3-2 with 52 KOs, fought everyone, and was part of the Four Kings. We'll get into that in a moment, and we're also going to break down what had transpired in boxing recently and what's forthcoming. Enjoy, people.
Yeah, so first things first, we're going to get into the life of Marvin Hagler, who is one of the greatest middleweight champions and also one of the greatest champions in the history of boxing. He died in the last week or so, and it's a huge blow to the sport of boxing and just to the world in general. I mean, he definitely went far too soon, and he was somebody that everybody in the boxing world respected a lot. Let's check out a little tribute video to Marvin Hagler.
That's what I feel. War. That's what's on my mind.
Unbelievable. Middleweight champion of the world, marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Hearns comes back. Another right. That one's done. Hearns.
Brother, goosebumps watching that. I mean, look at that career. He fought everyone, and we'll get into that in a moment about how a lot of people don't fight everyone nowadays.
A lot of people just don't even fight, period, actually.
Inactivity. Yeah. I mean, the marvelous one, I mean, look what he did even after boxing. He moved to Italy, became like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, as my boy Billy C said, on his podcast the other day. Like, he went over to Italy and became like an action film star. Great guy. It's hard to imagine someone that was so full of life. And the way he fought, look at the fight with John the Beast Mogami, man. Come on, dude. Those fights were remarkable, and the obvious one everyone wants to talk about all the time is Hagler Hearns. That was a crazy fight. It blew off right off the mat, right off the jump, 3 rounds of just chaos. And, I get choked up talking about it, Kev. I mean, this was a bizarre loss to me because he seemed so young, still looking great, and just so full of life.
It was so unexpected, and also I think because he's somebody that's been kind of a very private person. I think that's what kind of threw everybody into a little bit of a shock, because a lot of the former fighters, they are still kind of around, and you'll see them in little videos here and there, and they're still engaging with the public. But I think that's almost like Hagler's always kind of been like more of a private guy, not flamboyant, just kind of a lunch pail type of fighter, go and do his job and handle his business in the most professional manner as possible. And I think that's somebody that everybody in boxing always kind of looks to as a positive model of, if you want to bring up a fighter, you wish that you had somebody like Marvin Hagler, that you were kind of managing or training and whatnot.
Blue collared guy, always brought the lunch pail to work. You know, you look at fights, the big, controversial one is him against Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, I could watch that fight a million times. Mind you guys, it was 15 rounds, which is a whole different animal.
Actually, I think it was a 12-round fight.
Was it a 12-rounder?
Yeah, it was. And I think that was kind of the thing that soured a lot of people because, Sugar Ray Leonard kind of, I guess you could say, snookered him into making it a 12-round fight, because I think if it went 15 rounds, I think Hagler would have pulled out a pretty clear decision.
So that's my wishful thinking about the 15 rounds, because I always wanted it to be that 15. Yeah. But I mean, either which way you swing it, that was a hell of a fight. And
Leonard, you got to give Leonard credit, though. I mean, he is a very smart businessman. I mean, he handled his career pretty well, at least before the retirement. But yeah, I mean, that fight itself was a great fight, and it was a great fight just because of the anticipation of the fight. I mean, people waited so long, and it did actually deliver. I mean, there was definitely ebbs and flows, and Hagler fought in probably a little bit different of a manner that you would have expected early, and he did lose some of the early rounds. I think he was fighting orthodox, and people felt that, if you're a southpaw, it's probably better for you to use that as your advantage. But he felt that he could go in there and outbox Leonard, beat him at his own game. And some of those early rounds he did lose. And I thought he started coming on late. And what's funny is that's one of those fights that to this day, I mean, it's still split down the middle. I mean, it's still disputed on who won that fight. It's just so intriguing to me how boxing just stands the test of time. Even so, I'll use this as an example. So that's a fight that you said you probably watched, I don't know, maybe probably 20, 30 times, I'm sure. How many other sports is there a sporting event that you can watch more than once? I can't really think of any other sport besides boxing. Maybe mixed martial arts is kind of similar in that sense, combat sports in general. Even professional wrestling, you could watch an old fight, but there's just so much nostalgia, like with these guys. And I really wish that today's boxing could really bring some of that back, because Marvin Hagler was such a great champion. And he's just going to be missed by everybody, because he gave us so much joy, and he really brought his best, every time out.
He fought everyone, and that's a great point you're making, Kev, is that, with boxing, it has rewatch value. Like, I could rewatch, Trinidad versus Vargas and, Holyfield versus Tyson numerous times. And because it's like we're studying things, like, it's a big event, because things build up to those events where you're like, oh man, I've been waiting 6 months, a year, or however long it takes to get to that point. I mean, people play baseball every day, and I love baseball. People, play football, once a week, obviously, and I love football. Sometimes you can rewatch those things, and obviously the players study the tape, but as a fan from nostalgia, I mean, maybe it's because I'm diehard with boxing, but I could always go back and watch a fight numerous times over and over again. Like, for example, perfect example is I was watching Ali Frazier 1 the other day. I've seen that fight numerous times. Every single time I watch that fight, I take away something different every single time. What Ali was doing, what Frazier was doing, the whole impact of the event was so amazing, and just like the atmosphere and what those guys gave. And also another 2 fights thereafter, especially the third one. I mean, wow. The whole thing is that, Marvin Hagler is that old school, like you said, bro, you said it best. He's bringing his lunch pail to work, blue collared. He'll fight anyone, anytime. And that's what the sport of boxing needs. And we talked about, the Sugar Ray fight, regardless of what anyone thinks about the verdict, that made Hagler just kind of say, you know what, man, I'm over this. I'm going to go and do a film career in Italy and move over there. And he did a great job. I've seen some of his films.
And you know what, too? Some of the greats, they knew when to and I mean, obviously he did lose the fight on the scorecards, but in reality, he went out on top. So you have to give him a lot of credit for that, because there's a lot of fighters that they just don't know. Once they hit their peak and then they kind of go below their peak, they just still keep going. And sometimes that's because they love the sport. Sometimes that's because they need money. I think in Marvin Hagler's case, he felt that he achieved everything that he thought he was going to achieve in the sport of boxing, and he was going to get out the right time. And you have to definitely respect him for that.
Yeah, look at it, like, Lennox Lewis did the same thing. There's only a few fighters that had, first of all, a nice bankroll, to get out at the right time, and then also understand when it was kind of time to hang it up. I don't think Hagler necessarily, was shop worn. I thought he did a great job in the Leonard fight. And I'm gonna be one of those guys that say, like, I thought Hagler won it, but I mean, no disrespect to Sugar Ray. I mean, he's one of the best to ever do it. But excuse me, he knew it was time to get out and go on to different things. Like maybe he was over the politics and all the stuff that goes along with boxing. But Kev, speaking about politics, we'll get in there in a moment. Not the actual politics that go on in the world, but the politics of boxing. We'll get there for sure. But let's talk about the results of the week, man. I mean, Virgil Ortiz. Wow.
Virgil Ortiz, good young fighter. I think he moved his record to 17-0. Beat
17 knockouts.
Yes,
with 17 knockouts.
I forgot about that. 17-0 and 17 knockouts, and he's got a pretty entertaining style. He's with Golden Boy Promotions, which is Oscar De La Hoya is the CEO of the company, and then everybody knows who Oscar De La Hoya is, one of the great Hall of Famer, one of the all-time greats in boxing, one of the most popular fighters of his own era. And this guy looks to be his next top or potentially future world champion. We'll see how it goes. I think they're going to have to slow him down a little bit, but this was definitely a good performance for him. He's only 22 years old, so I don't think you need to rush and put him in there with guys like Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence. Not saying that he doesn't have a shot at beating those guys, but I definitely think he needs a little bit more seasoning. But beating Maurice Hooker, who's a former champion at 140 pounds, was a good step up for him. He did have some rough patches here and there, but he broke the guy down. He got the knockout. What were your thoughts on that fight, John?
Well, you said it right there. Like, he's flawed. In Virgil Ortiz is that he's flawed, and that's what makes him TV friendly, because he gets hit and he hits back and he makes adjustments. Great body attack. Young, hungry, like you said. Also, at 22 years old, like
his offense is kind of like his defense. But
absolutely,
but he's not a terrible defensive fighter. I mean, he does move his, he moves his head. He keeps his hands high. He's a pretty basic type of defense, but with the style that he has, I mean, you can't expect him to be Floyd Mayweather throwing all those punches that he throws. So the defensive style that he uses works with his very offensive volume punching style. Any other thoughts on that performance from Ortiz, and what did you think of Maurice Hooker's performance?
Maurice tried to do the best he could. It was a competitive fight. For Ortiz, like you said, he should not try to be a Floyd Mayweather. There's certain people that have athletic ability to put on that kind of performance, like, a Mayweather, if you will, performance, like a Roy Jones or whatever. Virgil Ortiz is not that guy. But I think that the thing for him to do is to stick with learning, go to the drawing board every single time you go to training camp. I mean, listen, this kid at 22 years old is ferocious. Again, 17-0, 17 knockouts. He's doing something right. Okay. As far as trying to be like the most versatile boxer on the planet, yeah, he could work on defense better. You mentioned the high guard. Like, he does keep his hands up really, really well, but he also shoots to the body extremely well. I'd like to see him against, and you're pulling up the names right now. I think we talked, offline the other day, like Ugas or like a Josito Lopez, Lipinets. He's got like a little bit of work to do.
What about putting him in there with David? I'm have such a hard time pronouncing these names.
Go ahead.
Athanasian.
Okay.
He's from where is he based out of?
Right now he's training in Miami, I believe.
No, that's Ugas. He's based out of the UK, but I believe he is Armenian by nationality. But he's a pretty good fighter. He's fought some pretty decent competition. He actually just stopped the upcoming UK prospect in Josh Kelly, who was undefeated. So he's number 6 in the world. That's the guy that I see that just because a lot of the fighters in the top 10, they're going to demand a lot of money. So I don't see him facing Terrence Crawford. I don't see him facing Errol Spence. I don't see him facing Sean Porter. I mean, none of those guys are going to fight a prospect. I mean, it really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Mikey Garcia, he's chasing big fights. Ugas, I believe, has a fight scheduled. I'm not 100% certain. Danny Garcia is moving up to 154 pounds. Jesse Vargas, that's actually a good fight. What do you think about that? Does that seem like a good option for Ortiz as a step up? Is that a step up or a step down? How do you feel there?
I think it's good as a step up, and for Vargas, who I respect and all that kind of good stuff, like he's had experience, and we know the track record with Vargas. I think obviously Ortiz wins that fight. It would be good experience, but what does that really do to push the needle forward in terms of like getting like kind of like name recognition? Like, you mentioned like great fighters like Sean Porter, who I really respect, and Danny Garcia, who I respect as well. I think that those are the names they should go after to keep like people buzzing, like, because that's what boxing needs right now, man. Like,
I think they're gonna go out there and try to make it appear like they're looking for those names. But I think in reality, Oscar De La Hoya knows he can't make deals with any of those fighters at this point. Ortiz is still kind of building his profile. He's not a big name. Doesn't have a whole lot of really significant fights. He needs to beat a Jesse Vargas, in my opinion, to get the attention of the public. Jesse Vargas is a former world champion. He's a veteran. He's fought Manny Pacquiao. He's fought Mikey Garcia. And he's somebody that he's not a big name, but he's definitely a bigger profile name than a Maurice Hooker. And at the same time, I think that Jesse Vargas is he needs a big win also. So I think it's kind of a crossroads. It's a veteran, former world champion, and an upcoming guy kind of meeting at the crossroads and seeing who's going to kind of get into the top 10. I think both those guys, and even you see on the box rec here, both guys are on the cusp of the top 10. Jesse Vargas, the computer has Jesse Vargas at number 8. For anybody that doesn't know, box rec is the computerized rankings, but it's pretty accurate for the most part. I mean, most of these guys are somewhere in the top 20 or should be in the top 20, give or take, 2-3 spots up or down. So anything else jump out at you there, or do you want to move on? Or
well, I mean, my thing is that I like to see Ortiz step up and, like I said, get that name recognition, like that makes him a household name or makes him a little bit more with notoriety. And like Jesse Vargas is certainly a name that has for the diehards. But, I need to see my homies like, Errol Spence go out there, Terrence Crawford. This is what we're talking about, like before when we started the show, to bookend a little bit about, the first segment here is that, those guys used to fight back in the day, the Haglers, the Hearns. Like, if you look at the ages in which they fought, I'm not talking about like the age and era. I'm talking about like the age in which they fought in their early 20s. Like, these guys were up and coming, and they threw the fucking nuts and guts out there to the world, the gusto, to hear like, I'm a huge Terrence Crawford fan, like, make no mistake. But to hear him say, I don't ever want to fight Earl Spence again, or rather just in general, he's not entertaining the thought.
John, but you do have to remember, to put things in context there, Errol Spence was asking for 60% of the purse, and then he went to he did some interview and he said he wanted 80%. So I mean, at that point, I don't want to put all the blame on Errol Spence, but when somebody makes a comment like that, and you both are legitimate world champions, you kind of are like pricing yourself out of the fight, because I mean, any person with, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. So if you were a professional fighter, would you let somebody who's your equal take 80% of the money? I don't think
no,
so.
you go 50-50,
yeah,
or
so,
at least
work something out
60-40,
that's reasonable. I mean, if you're getting $1 billion and he said take 20% of $1 billion, you might think about it, but under those circumstances only.
You know what? I agree with you, bro. Let's move on to Artur Beterbiev, who just did his thing. You know, another one that's got nothing but knockouts on his record, 16-0, 16 KOs.
And he's the WBC and the WBO, or is he there's just so many belts. I mean, it just makes me dizzy, but
it's impossible. It's impossible to keep up with it.
Let's call him the unified light heavyweight champion. The other belt, I believe it's the WBA belt, belongs to Dmitry Bivol. Beterbiev beat a pretty game German in Adam Dienes, or I guess that's
Dienes. I mean, there's a lot of things we could say here.
Either way, I mean, he was an unknown opponent who had one loss in his record. I believe he was 19-1 with about 11 or 12 knockouts.
That is correct.
I mean, he really he made Beterbiev look a little bit rusty. I mean, he really did. I mean, he was moving well. I think based on what I saw there, it's one of those where I think Canelo was kind of licking his lips a little bit, licking his chops, and seeing, you know, if this guy who's a basic fundamentals, you know, moving southpaw, landed some pretty good, you know, left hands here and there, was able to move for maybe 6-7 rounds and kind of stay out of harm's way until, you know, his gas tank got a little bit low and he started getting hit a little bit more. But Beterbiev looked like he was plotting a lot. And I think Canelo I'm not saying Canelo would entertain the fight, but I think it's one of those situations where like when Canelo was going to fight Triple G and he kind of dumped his belt in the trash, and he waited for Triple G to kind of start slipping a little bit. I saw some slippage there that might have been inactivity. I believe he was out of the ring for about 19 months, which is, especially for a guy at his age, I believe he's 36 years old. That's a long time to be out of the ring. And he's 36 years old and he only has 16 professional fights. So what's your thoughts? Where does he go? I don't even think we really need to talk too much about the fight itself. I mean, it was a very workmanlike performance from him, and he got a knockout, I believe, in the 9th round from a counter hook, I believe. Where does he go next? Where is he just going to kind of sit around and fight, you know, another mandatory, or is there a unification with Bivol down the line? Where does he go?
Well, I think that they're trying to match him up with Joe Smith. You know, if he gets past his assignment coming up that he has on ESPN coming up, and I think that's a very good fight, workman type fight. But let me just say this: a point you made that is a very great point. This guy, you know, in Beterbiev has not been in the ring in over 500 days. And some people are like, you know, they're trying to get rounds in. He's trying to get rounds. And I'm like, you know, if you're a fighter, man, you fight. You ain't fucking around. You ain't trying to play with your food. You're just trying to go for it, bro. Like, if you get someone out of there, you get them out of there quick. I don't care what anyone fucking tells me. Like, yes, if you're like sparring, maybe you want to get some rounds. But if you're actually competing on national television at a world-class level, okay, and like you had mentioned, his opponent had only one loss. That's a world-class level. You know, people could say, who did the opponent fight? at the end of the day, he got to that point where he was on ESPN. So you don't take anyone lightly. Like, you don't fuck around there. Like, it's dangerous territory. For Beterbiev, I think he's a very, very skillful fighter. I think he showed ring rust. He got the stoppage in the 10th round. He got a knockdown early. In the first round, he put his opponent down. He showed his great, attributes and skill set. But I mean, who does he go to after this? Well, I think that, again, if Smith Jr. comes out, triumphant with his assignment on ESPN soon, I think that that's the logical thing because of, again, I don't want to get into the political side of boxing, but network divides. They're on the same network, so I think that's the most logical.
That's a good style matchup because Joe Smith is a puncher. They're both punchers. I mean, it's gonna be like two planes just flying right into each other, and we're gonna see which one blows up first. So
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I like that fight. But he has a pretty tough opponent. In Maxim Vlasov that he's going to be fighting, and I believe that guy's only has a couple losses, and he's a pretty good veteran. So
that's a very tough fight.
It's definitely not a gimme by any means. So whichever guy wins, I think is actually going to be a pretty solid opponent. It's obviously neither guy is a huge name, but it's still it'll be a good fight for the hardcore boxing fans, and whoever wins out of those, maybe they can put B-ball in there with those guys. It's just very difficult when you have two guys that are kind of from opposite sides of the street and they don't bring anything to the table as far as being a draw. So hopefully we can get some of these unifications in the light heavyweight division and see, and maybe in the next year or so, some of these other 168 guys might move into the picture. Possibly David Benavidez, who's a great former champion, but he's undefeated, lost his title on the scales, and possibly Canelo if he can kind of clean out most of these 168 pounders like Billy Joe Saunders. Let's go into that actually, but I want to introduce a segment that we're going to have on this show from now on, and it's called The Sauce. And basically what the sauce is kind of like us mixing our opinions on different things going on in the boxing world. Like you would make a big soup or you would make a big pasta sauce, but we're just throwing in bell peppers and, tomatoes and onions. And so it's kind of our take on the boxing, but in a saucy kind of way. So kind of the way we do things here on Kayonation. So John, what do you want to talk about as far as like, what's the sport going to look like in the next 6 months? What fights that have not been scheduled do you see kind of coming to fruition, or what fights that have not been on the schedule yet would you like to see happen before the end of the year? Kind of push us in a direction, create some excitement for us for the rest of this year. Obviously, we're just in the first quarter, but there's a lot of fights that have not been announced. So maybe send a message out there to these promoters. Let's see where we can go here.
Well, guys, we all know I'm a fan of the UFC. Okay, we got Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou in the heavyweight division coming up this weekend. That's the best fight they could possibly make in the UFC at the heavyweight ranks. And the UFC has also rolled out great fights at any weight class, male or female, it doesn't matter. They're just doing it. Boxing, what I need you to do is I want to ask you a question right now. Where the fuck is my Tyson Fury versus Joshua fight? Where is all these other fights that should happen? And I'm not trying to like throw out hater tots and haterade and all that kind of shit. But I want to say, like, it's time that we roll out the big fights. Spence. Come on, man. Spence and Terrence Crawford. Like, I could go on and on about the list of fights that need to happen. And, luckily, I have to say this for my sport. The people that need the paychecks have been showing up. Adam Lopez, great job. He's been out there working. There's a lot of fighters that's been out there working, and they're setting up like smaller scale fights, but at least they're doing it during COVID times. Like all our marquee boxers, like our top names. Yes, we are getting Canelo. And a lot of people are probably saying right now, well, we got Canelo. Billy Joe Saunders, come on, bro. Like, I mean, his style might complicate, certain things for Canelo, but we know what's going to happen there. And at the end of the day, like, look, let's take a look at Billy Joe Saunders. I'm going to tell you how I really feel right now. This guy's dysfunctional. He's abusive. You ever see what he done to women on the streets and things that he says? Come on, man. My thing is that, I don't want to see a guy like Billy Joe Saunders get a payday, and I hope I get to see him get his ass whooped straight up, because I know certain things about him behind the scenes that I am not happy with, and I think he's a scumbag, and I hope Canelo, which I know he'll do, is take his head off. But that doesn't do anything for me aside from the satisfaction of seeing Billy Joe Saunders lay on the mat and get destroyed.
So John, you don't think Billy Joe Saunders has any shot at beating Canelo Alvarez? You don't give him you think
fuck no.
Like you think that's that's a 6 or 7 to 1 fight, or is that a 3 to 1, or what would you place the odds on that one? I think Billy Joe Saunders is a very live underdog based on his style. And I think he the problem with him is he fights at the level of his opposition. But when I saw him fight David Lemieux, I mean, I thought he looked amazing. I mean, the way that he was fighting, the skills, I mean, he was using his jab, he was moving at angles. I mean, David Lemieux could not hit him. I mean, he really could not get set. And I think that's how you have to fight Canelo. You cannot let Canelo get set where he gets his 1-2s off, his combinations. I think you even brought up the other day that Canelo hasn't really been throwing as many combinations since he's moved up in weight. And I think against Billy Joe Saunders, he's going to have to throw combinations, because I think Billy Joe Saunders is very good at that southpaw style, keeping his, his right foot on the outside of your lead foot. He doesn't do anything that is very special, but he's very tricky. He's I think he's from kind of the same, I don't know if he's from the same stable, but I believe he's kind of been around Tyson Fury, and they've kind of done a lot of training together and stuff. So
I respect Tyson Fury.
He's not a big puncher, but he's tough. I mean, he's a tough guy. And if he's in really good condition, and that's really the question mark with him, is his conditioning. I think he'll give Canelo some problems. I can't perceive him winning a decision against Canelo Alvarez. I mean, obviously.
No, let me tell you this, brother, is that, listen, as much as I was just talking shit about Billy Joe Saunders, I don't like the way he conducts himself outside the ring, and it really bothers me, and it makes me not a fan. Yes, he does have good boxing skill, and yes, he is friends with Tyson Fury, who I have a lot of respect for, especially considering all the things and trials and tribulations that Tyson Fury went through, okay? Billy Joe Saunders has a style that will complicate a little bit to Canelo, because we've seen it in the past. Israel Lara, other boxers like Floyd Mayweather, they give him complications. But I think the major thing is that look how much Canelo has grown over the years, how powerful he is, how passionate and committed to the game. I mean, you look at Billy Joe Saunders, like, yes, he's unbeaten. Fine. I'll accept that. But what's his passion? Like how committed to this game has he really been? And what has he really proven? Yeah, he beat David Lemieux, but David Lemieux doesn't use angles. Canelo does. And also David Lemieux he's a one-trick pony. He's got power. But Canelo has many, many tricks and many tools.
He does have many wrinkles, but many more wrinkles to his game than David Lemieux.
Absolutely.
But I just wanted to bring that up because that was his best performance, and I believe that was probably the best opponent that he's fought, except for maybe Chris Eubank when he beat him, but that was kind of on their way up, so I don't really put too much stock into that because obviously he's improved quite a bit, and he's fighting at a bigger weight class, so that's obviously going to factor in his conditioning. So it's definitely going to be interesting, and that fight is in May, correct?
Yeah, that fight is in May. Right around Cinco de Mayo. Which we all love to see. Fights and have the celebration for that amazing holiday, and
Yeah,
especially when you have.
I'm gonna say something about that whole deal. Why isn't this fight at Allegiant Stadium in our home of Las Vegas? I mean, shouldn't that be here?
Purse bids, brother. Site fees. AT&T. They paid for it in Dallas. They're gonna have 60,000 people there.
Why can't they have 60,000 people here?
Vegas is not allowing that right now. The thing is, Texas is.
We know what that's about, right? Politics. Yeah. Anyways, let's move on.
Yeah. It's Texas and Florida. If you guys want to fight in America, I'm gonna tell you right now, Texas and Florida is the place to fight.
Yeah. Sisolak, are you listening? Anyways, moving on. So, anything else you want to talk about, John? Would you like to talk about Fury and Joshua, or you want to leave that to the next show? We'll go into that.
You know what? I'll go there in a moment, but I want to give a shout out to Ring City Boxing, NBC. They're doing a great production over there, and there was an excellent fight with Angel Ferrero and then also Alberto Machado.
Oh, and I saw some footage from that. That looked like a pretty really good scrap. I'm sure. I hope a lot of people got to see that.
Dude, that fight was a firefight. I mean, we had 2 knockdowns in the first round, and then a stoppage that ended up, I think, in the 4th round, and it was just like one of those barn burners, bro. Like, it reminded me of like old school like Tuesday night fights, even though it was on a Thursday in this case. But they're doing a great job over there. Like, they got them in Puerto Rico, and beautiful environment. And all the people involved, Evan Ratowski, Brian Campbell, Joe Papa, Sean Porter, like they're doing a dynamite job, and we're getting really good fights. And they have another one coming up this week with Amanda Serrano. And I'm looking for
like I mean, for free TV, I mean, I'll take anything I can get. But Amanda Serrano, for as far as women fighters goes, I mean, she's one of the she's one of the best, obviously, because, I mean, she's in the probably top 5 pound for pound. But that's not what I don't care about her pound for pound status. She puts on entertaining fights. And she's one of the few women boxers that actually scores knockouts. I believe she has about 25, 26 knockouts and about almost 40 wins. And, I mean, and I don't want to be disparaging here, but most women can't crack an egg when it comes to boxing. I don't know. I think we talked about that, what the reasoning behind that was. My reasoning is
the rounds, the length.
Well, that was one thing I brought up was the length of the rounds. I think if you had 3-minute rounds for women, they would score more knockouts. I think if there was 12 round fights, there would be more knockouts because obviously there's 2 more rounds to score a knockout. And I think just from in general, I mean, I'm married. You're married also. Women have smaller hands than men, but in the similar weight classes, they actually wear the same size gloves. And I think if they wore smaller gloves, it would still protect the hands. But I think for a woman welterweight to be wearing the same size glove as a male, I think it's kind of counterproductive. I think this whole idea that women in the sport of boxing, they want equality, and I think they should have equality. But if they want the equality, my opinion is, and other women have said this as well. There's a lot of professional women boxers who don't want to fight 2-minute rounds because when they spar in the gym, they don't spar 2-minute rounds. Many of them spar 3-minute rounds or 4-minute rounds. And
plus.
Exactly. So I think a lot of them are, or at the very least, I think something that could be changed is in championship fights, I think that's where they should try out having women fight 3-minute rounds and 12-round fights. I think it's something that the WBC, hear me, WBC, should try out. And the WBC has been very good at kind of revolutionizing certain things in boxing. Obviously, people love to criticize the sanctioning bodies, but they have made some contributions to the sport of boxing. So I don't always want to be somebody who's cynical all the time. Some of these sanctioning bodies have done some very positive things, like, the clean boxing program, for example. So yeah, what other things? I just want to kind of move into that real quick. What are some of the positive things that the sanctioning bodies have brought to the sport of boxing, at least recently, anyways? So we don't be so cynical.
I'll answer that question in a moment, but I just want to touch on what you said about the ladies. I've had a lot of female boxers and mixed martial artists come on the show recently, and they are very passionate, and they're saying exactly what you're saying. They want to jockey for that position to get the extended rounds, the lower ounce gloves, and they pretty much want to be treated like the men are treated in the sport, not only for the pay, but for the passion. Like, there's something I gauged when I was talking to these ladies.
I understand what you're saying. Like, not to cut you off, just to add just real quick, is they're putting in the work. So if they put in the work, they deserve to be respected. And I think it's kind of a situation where they're shortchanged a little bit because they're fighting the 2-minute rounds, and they're not fighting the same amount of rounds as men. And it's not looked at in the same manner. It's kind of making them not look equal. And I think that's become like a big problem, because if you look at women's MMA is not like that.
It's treated just like the men. Yeah, they do the same rules. Yep.
So sorry to cut you off there, John. Continue.
No, it's all good. You're right. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, because they treat them in the MMA. They treat the ladies just like they treat the men. Non-championship bout, they go 3 rounds at 5 minutes. Championship bout, they go 5 rounds at 5 minutes. There's no difference. And I think that's why we get a little bit more electrifying, sensations as a viewer to watch, the female MMA. And I'm not crapping on women's boxing, because, listen, I support it. Like, the women I've had on my show, like, they gave me so much about the insight and a whole new appreciation, brother. Like, let me tell you something. These girls, man, they came from the same things that men went through. They came from the same things that anyone went through: struggles, trials, tribulations, all this type of stuff. And they're fighters. And guess what, Kev? They could probably kick your and mine ass at the same time, And I got to give them credit for that. Like,
they'd run me out of the ring, John.
Absolutely, Kev. You'd have no chance. These ladies were so amazing. And I wanted to go back and touch on something you asked me before about what my thoughts are on Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. Okay, obviously they're going to wait for a crowd to be in attendance, because that's the gate. That's how they make a lot of money. Like, the pay-per-view, yes, will do well, but the gate makes a lot of money. There's more incentives, and I'm not pretending to be like a guy that knows all about this, but it's common fucking sense. So what happens here with this fight, I think that Tyson Fury will triumph. He always finds a way. I think that Joshua's got good power. I think he burns his gas tank out, and he's got situations with that needs to be repaired. He's got a lot of muscles that requires a lot of oxygen. Tyson Fury is a very loose guy. Like, he could absorb punishment. He could take shots. He's got a great chin, all that kind of stuff. And he also knows how to box, especially for a big man. He's got very, he's got agility, and that's what really angles win fights.
But I do think that Anthony Joshua is being highly overlooked here, and part of that is I've seen some improvements. Like, even his last fight, he looked pretty good against Kubrat Pulev. Obviously, it's Kubrat Pulev, but he fought almost like flawlessly against Ruiz in the rematch. Even though it wasn't entertaining at all, he definitely he pretty much neutralized any offense that Ruiz just could not get off. So pretty much I think it's going to be very interesting for the fact that I think Joshua's boxing ability has improved a lot, and his tactics. I think he's a little bit more patient. I don't think he's just going to go in there just thinking he's going to try to tear off, Tyson Fury's head. I think he's going to be able to box with him, and he's the bigger puncher. So to me, I mean, this is as 50-50 of a heavyweight fight as it gets. I know that Tyson Fury, I believe, has already opened up as a slight favorite. I believe he's like a minus 170, and Joshua was a slight underdog, about plus. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much even. It's how the betting goes. They open up the line a certain way to get action. From one side or the other. So, but definitely Tyson Fury deserves to be the favorite. But
yes,
Joshua is as live of an underdog as it gets.
Listen, man, I don't want to fat shame Andy Ruiz because I got fat for a little while too. I know what it's like to be fat, but the second fight, like, I can't gauge Joshua's performance. Yes, he came back from being knocked out, and psychologically, that is a damaging thing. In the first fight, what he suffered against Andy Ruiz, and credit to Andy, like, he got off the mat and he knocked Joshua out, and that's pretty amazing. It's very impressive. The second fight, he had a very, very not in shape. I'm going to put it politely. Okay. I'm not going to go all Pedro Fernandez here, because you know what Pedro would say, go off the rails on this. So my thing is that I'm going to be nice to Mr. Andy Ruiz, is that he wasn't in the best shape. We could face facts. Yeah. And Anthony Joshua,
it's not that he wasn't in the best shape. He wasn't in shape.
He wasn't in shape.
He was just a big shape.
Yeah. What's that movie, The Great White Hype? When, Damon Wayans' character, and the trainer's like, you got to get yourself in shape. He's like, I'm in shape. I'm round. That's pretty much what he was. Get the champ some peanut butter ice cream. Like, what is going on? So I'm watching this thing, and what's crazy is that despite Ruiz not being in shape, he touched Joshua and he hit him. Joshua got hit quite a bit during that thing, and that was concerning to me. I'm like, okay, this guy's out of shape. You're clearly outboxing him. Why are you getting hit? Think about Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis would not allow that sort of thing. Joshua has a tendency to stick too much on the inside.
Too, though, what happened was, what I saw there, his tactics were correct, but you could kind of tell that he was uncomfortable with the tactics. So it was very new to him to fight in that manner, but he was successful doing it. So I did like to see that. And I would like to see if he could improve on those tactics. And I think he will, because I did see some of that against Pulev also. He was a little bit more defensively responsible when he was attacking. He wasn't just, if he thought he had his opponent a little buzzed, he just didn't unload, he didn't just go for everything. He didn't get over.
You could say it. He didn't shoot his load.
He didn't shoot his load. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, he took his time a little bit better, and he gave respect to his opponents, and just showed a little bit more of a boxing IQ than he did in the Ruiz fight, the first one, where he just figured, and I've seen that with him in multiple fights. I saw that against Dylan White. He got a little bit reckless there. I believe there was another fight where he against Povetkin. I think he made a couple big mistakes against Klitschko. So I mean,
yeah,
he's definitely shown a lot of vulnerabilities. So against Tyson Fury, he's really, he can't really be making too many mistakes. Tyson Fury obviously is not a huge puncher, but he showed against Deontay Wilder. He's very versatile, and he has multiple facets to how he can approach a game planning for a fight.
Well, the thing about Tyson Fury, what he'll do is he knows pressure points. He knows where to hit you. He'll hit you on a temple, hit you on the ear. He makes you very uncomfortable. You don't need to be the best, strongest puncher on the planet, but if you know where to hit someone, like, that matters, And if you look at what happened in the second fight with Wilder, he hit him on a great spot that totally discombobulated him, threw his equilibrium off, and made him weird the entire fight. And that's the art of fighting. Now, it could be coincidence, it could be luck, it could be, set of circumstance, whatever. But to be able to do that is incredible. You mentioned before we close out, White. We got White and Povetkin 2 coming up on Saturday. I like Dillian White, even though he's got problems. You know, it's like a little chinny last one. But what do you think about this fight?
I mean, it's definitely a fight where obviously the favorite from the first fight is getting his rematch, because he was definitely looked like he was on his way to a knockout, and pretty much he just got knocked out of nowhere. I mean, it was a one-punch knockout of the year type shot, and I believe Povetkin was recovering from COVID. So I've had COVID myself. My wife has had it. Different people recover in different ways. I had a very mild symptoms. My wife, on the other hand, had some very serious symptoms. Her condition worsened over a 3-week period. She did have to go to the hospital to stay overnight to get, some medicine and whatnot. And she had a recovery period afterwards. So it's pretty quick to be in a prize fight after that. And from what I know, he was somebody that he was sick. He wasn't somebody that just had mild symptoms. He was pulled out of the fight and he was sick for quite some time. And I believe Beterbiev also had a similar situation as well. So when you saw him this past weekend, he didn't look like himself. Like he had really had a good training camp. So, I mean, regardless of even that, I'm just bringing that into the picture of something to look at. Povetkin is I believe he's 40 years old. That was his last stand to me. And I think Dillian White, if Dillian White is going to go anywhere in the heavyweight division, he's got to win this fight. He's got to win it impressively. He's had so many fights where he's kind of eked them out against, I guess you could say, contenders or potential slightly world-class opposition, like his fights with Joseph Parker that probably could have went either way. His fights with Derek Chisora. He seems like he's been on the cusp of a title shot for probably like the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, this is somebody that I give him a lot of credit, because most guys just want to fight complete stiffs on their way to a title shot, and they will sit on that mandatory ranking. But this guy is willing to fight anybody. So I'm going to give him credit. I think he's going to win the fight. I wish him all the best. And if Povetkin can pull another trick out of his bag, more power to him. I just don't think it's going to happen this time. I think this is his last stand here.
When you suffer knockouts, like White had, especially during the COVID testing positive, like, we don't know what that does as an end result. And thankfully, you and your wife are fine. And I've had a lot of friends that have dealt with the COVID, and it's affected them in different ways. We won't know until maybe several months down the line. That's another story for another time. I like Dillian White. I think he's got a great left hook. I think he's a strong fighter. I think he's a passionate fighter. I think he's vulnerable, and especially suffering, coming off a knockout like that, man, that is really, really hard. It's really, really hard to recover. We've seen it time and time again in the sport of boxing, where guys aren't the same. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, look at Fernando Vargas back in the day against Felix Trinidad. He suffered 2 knockdowns in the first round of that fight. Amazing fight, by the way. Drops Trinidad in the 4th round, incredibly, and they went on to fight one of the greatest fights I've ever seen, on pay-per-view. I wasn't there live, but I saw it on pay-per-view, Witness. And all my friends are around. It was a barn burner, man. It was crazy. And you get to the 12th round, Fernando gets dropped almost immediately by a left hook that I thought his head was going to fall off. Okay. And then he gets up and then he keeps fighting. And then, Trinidad keeps putting the hurt on him. And then
I get your point. Where you're going there. But I think the Dillian White knockout he wasn't really taking a whole, really
one hit quitter.
Yeah.
One hit quitter. Yeah.
But mind you, but to agree with you there, Dillian White is pretty much in a fucking brawl every single time he's in the ring.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. He's a brawler.
Got a lot of miles on him. but Povetkin also has a lot of miles on him. So
he's old, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, here I'm just gonna go with the younger guy. I mean, the first fight, I think everybody was picking Dylan White also, but you can't count Povetkin out because I mean he's a former Olympic gold medalist, he's a former world champion. He's definitely a world-class level operator. He's only has, I believe, 2 losses to Anthony Joshua and to Vladimir Klitschko. So I mean, he's no pushover. I think people are really, and I think that happened. People kind of counted him out just because he hasn't been that active. So and hasn't really beaten a whole lot of significant opponents in the last few years. So your memory gets a little bit short when it comes to him, but you have to look at who he lost to, not necessarily that he lost.
And that's a great point. What do they say? Out of sight, out of mind. Like that's what happens.
Yeah.
Even for me, like we cover the sport at nauseum. We're always looking at things, but it's like sometimes someone will ask me about a fighter. I'm like, wait, who? What? Who's coming back? I haven't seen them fight in almost a year. And that's the problem with boxing that we need to correct nowadays, guys. Any fighters that are listening, and I know a lot of fighters that are out there earning their keep, and that's the time for them to do it because that's what's keeping the content going and keeping the needle moving forward. But I'm talking about big names, guys. Come back. Let's go. What are we doing? It's been over a year or plus since we've seen like really, really meaningful fights. Like, yes, we've seen great fights, and yes, we've seen passionate fighters, but I think we're at a time right now where we need to see some names come back. Baseball's done it. The NFL's done it. NBA's done it. A lot of sports, UFC, a lot of sports are doing it. Fucking bare knuckles are doing it. Like they're putting their best out there that they can. Like boxing, the top names. Where are you now?
Yeah, I feel you. Wow, John, anything else to talk about or
No, dude, I think that's it. I think we covered everything. We recapped. And again, tribute to the marvelous one, Marvin Hagler. I mean, he is probably, I think, in my top 10 favorite fighters of all time. And it goes and pays tribute to what I was talking about just now about wanting fighters to step up. Like, people should look at this man. He fought everyone. 4 kings, bro. He had no hesitation and no fear in fighting anyone at any point in time. And people would say, money was different then. They were a little bit more hungry and starving. They were more hungry and starving because they had balls, and I need fighters nowadays to show a little bit more of that. And if anyone has a problem hearing that is a fighter, come see me and tell me about like what complications you have about that, because it's like Eddie Murphy said in Raw, "What have you done for me, Eddie, lately?" Like Janet Jackson said, where is everybody? Where did everyone go? It's like hitting the lights and the crickets like are in your house, or rather not cockroaches. And then they just bounce.
Yeah.
COVID hit. Where are my fighters? Like, think about, like, people ask me all the time, like, who should I be following? I'm like, I like Terrence Crawford. I like this guy, that guy. Well, when's the last time they fought? Or when's the next time they fight? I'm like, I don't know. I have no fucking clue.
Yeah,
it's like, where are they?
I think it's a huge problem. It's definitely something that we could talk about next time.
This is what you get with the sauce, guys. Yeah, you get the sauce.
We definitely got to do another show soon, John. Hopefully we can bring on a guest next time, and some professional boxer or boxing aficionado. But yeah, so pretty good show, John, and everybody check out our next show, Kayonation. Hopefully the next show we'll have it scheduled out. We'll be able to get some people in the chat and get some live callers and answer some questions on here. Anything else,
That'd
John?
be great. No, that's it, brother. Thank you, man. This was awesome.
All right.
Unbelievable.